Good morning, dreamers. Wow, we are 14 days in. That's 2 whole weeks. That's incredible. So, thank you guys for continuing to pray and for joining with me in this whole thing. And I want to show you something that from yesterday. This here is stuff from my cubicle, and even this guy, I had I put that on top of my desk to be a stand-up desk. So um, replacement at work starts next week. And we're going to overlap for a couple of weeks for training purposes, but that means that I had to start moving stuff out of my cubicle because that's where he's going to be. And so, and I had my exit interview yesterday, so there's just a lot of like stuff going on, which is why today's lesson was just like perfectly timed, because what was in today's lesson is a big reason why I felt like God was asking me to step out of my 9 to 5 schedule, was so that I could love people well, that I could spend time with them and build relationships with them and be more intentional and have space for those gospel-centered conversations. And even little things like being able to go to lunch with my mom or my mother-in-law, who both expressed wanting to spend more time, or my sisters and other people in my family and my husband's family who aren't believers, and even those who are, just to have connection with people. So one thing I've really been praying about is community as I step out of this, because I feel like it's just become so important to me, but I think it's important to all of us as believers. And so also having that flexibility to really build community with people and that ability to be super intentional about it. So those are all things that I'm kind of like working through. Anywho, yeah, so that's just sort of like my lead in, because as I'm really like shifting my actual life, which is really, really crazy to think about and reflect on and to not get anxious about. Because I was like bringing stuff down, and yeah, it's just weird. That's just not something that I expected to be doing. But it's for the purpose of being able to love well. And so that's why I'm excited about it. I know that if God called me to this, He will A, provide for me, and B, give me space, and I can be intentional about creating that space. So that's what I really loved about today's prayer, is just how it was focused on a lot of the different ways that we can love people. I think just like everything else, we sort of put love in a box, whether it's romantic or otherwise, and think that there are only certain ways to love people. I mean, even when you think of like love languages and stuff like that, like what are the ways that you are loved and prefer to be loved? And that can be a thing that sort of chains you in, holds you down. And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way. So, yeah. So I think we need to, just like yesterday, when we need to be free to think of service as a good thing and not always a hard thing, that it might actually just use some of our giftedness to serve, I think we need to be free to think of love in the many capacities in which it will show up in our lives, the many capacities in which we can help people. And I think it goes hand in hand with service and obedience and all of those things. Like love could be meeting a need. Love could just be sitting and listening. Love could be, showing up regularly or praying for people. Like love looks like a lot of different things. And that's why I was going to say it reminded me of the paragraph, but now that I look at the beginning of it, I don't think it does. But I think that's just really important for us to remember as we want to love well, because I believe that we all want to love well. I don't think any of us is like, oh, well, loving, I don't want to do that. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's about giving ourselves the freedom and space to do that. So the thing that I loved, it's the longest paragraph here, so apologies that I may be reading for a long time. And actually, I think I picked the longest verse section too, but I just love how all-encompassing this is and how much it is kind of reminding me of all this. It says, Father, I pray that you would release me from my agenda, my plans, and my hopes for my life. By the way, that's a very dangerous prayer. So only pray that if you're actually ready to do that, because I feel like that was something I prayed, and ta-da, here we are, me packing up my cubicle stuff, which is great, but also terrifying. Instead, I pray that you would radically open me up to your plans, your hopes, and your kingdom to come. Use me, use all of us to be part of your greater story. Father, use our homes to invite others in, to sit around our tables for times of shared meals, fellowship, and community. Use our hearts to come together in loving hope, to rest, listen, and be the body of Christ for one another. Use our hands and give me words of encouragement to send notes and letters of affirmation to others. Show me who needs love. Use our minds and give us discernment and wisdom to speak truth into each other's lives. So I think that's the thing. We have to be flexible. God's love doesn't, and God's provision and God's work rarely shows up in one specific way all the time. So we have to be free and able to work within God's agenda and not our own, to not be pinned down to that. Instead, we need to radically open up to His plans, His hopes, and His kingdom to come. So when we focus on God's kingdom, then we are able to have that flexibility, and we're okay with it because we know that it's for a greater purpose. So yeah, I love all the different ways that she, I don't know why I said he, she lists like to pray for, to be part of the greater story, which I love story, and I love I love redemption stories. Those are my number one favorite stories. So the fact that we are all part of a redemption story is one of my favorite things about being a believer. But it says, use our homes to invite others in, and I feel like we just talked about this with Grace in our home a few days ago, and it's really been fresh on our hearts here, my husband and I, because we've been talking a lot about it and trying to figure out ways to be more intentional with the use of our home. And even going through a transition with our small group at church where like we want that to be a bigger part of our lives, and so maybe shifting to find new people who also make that a priority. So that's just something that's important for us, because I love sitting around a table with believers and just talking, even if it's not about God, even if it's just about life. Like, I love that we already have something in common, and I love that we can feel free to talk about things and just love one another in that way. Have our hearts to come together, to rest and listen and be the body for one another. To be encouraging and send affirmation. And I really also just love the discernment part. I think that's the part maybe that I think some people rely on that a lot, and some people don't rely on that enough. I think we rely a lot on discernment, like we just know, or we feel like we'll just know. We'll know what people will need. And I think sometimes we do, but I also think sometimes you have to ask. And ask them to be specific. Hi, Shirley. And I think discernment is important because then we are giving people what they really want and need. And I think this is in business too, right? Like, or even when we talk about like love languages, like we have been, it's one thing to love people the way you like to be loved, but true discernment and true service is to love people the way they need to be loved, that they prefer to be loved. And I think that's where this discernment comes in. So maybe you write this great note and they appreciate it, but if words of affirmation aren't their thing, it's not going to be not that it's not loving, but you see what I mean? Like, it's not going to come through. So it's the same thing with like your business, right? You're using your clients' words, you're talking to them, you're trying to reach and serve them, and that doesn't make it manipulative. It makes it, helps you bring down those barriers for them to be able to get the help that they really need. And so it sort of works the same way. When you love people, it's loving them the way that they want and need. Yeah, except it's like backwards, right? You help them, you love them the way they want and need, and not the way that you just like to love people. But that's okay too. Like, as long as you're loving people, that's awesome. But really think about and discern like the situation and the people, and ask yourself, like, can I love better in this situation? Just knowing the people that you're loving. And hi Shirley, it's 14, loving well. So yeah, we really just need to be free. And I feel like that's a lot of why I'm doing what I'm doing with leaving, is because I really just felt this need to be available, to have that flexibility, to not have my own agenda all the time. Because, I'm sorry if you can hear that, that's my dog getting comfortable. It's all about being, doing what God asks of us. And I think some of those big things like build my kingdom, tell people about me, because they're a little more abstract, we don't necessarily put them in our lives, in our schedules. And that's certainly true for me. Absolutely 100%. Because I get going to work. I get sitting and waiting and working on my business. I even get sitting and praying and doing these things. But that's more abstract. Like, it doesn't work the same way all the time. It doesn't look the same way all the time. And so it's hard to put that in to our lives. So I just encourage you to find ways to work that into your schedule. And I'll talk about a couple of ways that I'm going to be doing that. The verses that I left this week were the ones from Ezekiel, which is kind of, I don't know, that's very unusual for me. I'm not really a prophets girl, but I don't know why this really spoke to me today. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Then you will live in the land I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. Like, we're new people. We have a heart because we have God's heart. And I think it's easy for us to feel like if we dwell on our strengths and realize we're not empathetic people, I don't think that's really true. I think we have the Holy Spirit, and that builds that into us, into our lives. And I think this is just fresh for me because I don't see myself as an empathetic person. I don't feel a lot. I mean, I do feel a lot. That's just, it's going to sound terrible when I talk about it, but like when other people are crying, I don't just burst into tears like with them. I don't feel other people's emotions deeply, you know? And I understand them and I get where they're coming from, and you know, I can see how I would feel that way in that situation. So I think I'm more sympathetic than empathetic, if that makes sense. But I think there are times when that empathy really comes through, and I think you need that in business. Empathy is super important. But it's possible because we're able, when the right thing happens and you're able to just sort of like be in check with the spirit and really feel what someone else is feeling and be able to love them in that moment. Like, that's a gift that we have that not everybody has. Yeah, and part of that love is to follow his decrees and keep his law. So to follow and be a part of what he has already set in front of us. And live in the land I gave your ancestors. You will be my people and I will be your God. And I love how personal that is. Like, you are my people. I am your God. Like, we chose each other. And more than that, he chose us. Like, choosing God is one thing, but I feel like we also have this, like, it's because he chose us that we're able to choose him. But we were first chosen. I think that's so special to remember. So those are my insights from the text. But I wanted to help you make this practical for yourself. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit of the ways that me and my husband are working on loving well more around where we are, and where I plan to sort of incorporate this into my schedule once I am a full-time entrepreneur. So the first way is we do want to be more intentional here in our neighborhood. So we are going to first keep our house somewhat tidy so that we can have people over regularly. We really struggle with that. Second, we're just going to invite. I think we keep waiting to like have a big occasion instead of just like taking little opportunities to talk to people and invite people. I've been doing better like now that I'm home when I take the dog out, that we walk around and we talk to the people that we pass and stuff like that. So that's been helpful. So just creating ways to invite people in is going to be really important for us. And secondly, we're also working on a more flexible community, or even being more flexible ourselves in community, like being able to have a group of friends that we can call quickly on Saturday and say, hey, we, wanted to go to the movies tonight. Anybody want to go? Stuff like that. And that just wasn't available to us before, but I feel like what I've experienced of community in other places has been just this availability and this connection and just constant like dependence on one another, and that's not something that we have had recently. And so working to give up some of our independence in that way, so that we can be closer to God and closer to His people. And lastly, the last way I'm going to do this is, so I'm going to start taking Fridays off, like whenever not fully off, but like no client calls, no major work. That's going to be like content creation day and then afternoon of fun, like doing nothing. That's going to be my big thing. Because everything bad that's happened to me in my business has happened on a Friday recently. And so I'm just like, forget that. We're not going to have Friday anymore. Friday is fired and we're just going to have fun. And so that's really going to be what I am going to work in, so that I have specific time. So obviously being available for other people other parts of the week, but that's where I have like specific time where I intend to be out, where I intend to meet with people, or have lunch with family, or be out. So it's kind of a creative and connection day for me. So that's really what I'm going to do. Yeah, Amy, I totally plan to. That's like my thing now, is to make it a 3-day weekend every weekend. So I'll do content creation in the morning, but that's a couple of hours, and then I'm going to take the rest of the week, or the rest of the week and weekend, to really unplug. And so I'm really just looking forward to that time and having that available to me, so that I have, so that I'm able to just have that flexibility and be able to do what I feel like God asked me to do whenever He asked me to leave my job, which was to be available, to focus in one place to help women here, but also to focus on reaching other people outside of here, which I just didn't have. So those are some practical ways that I'm going to be working on loving people well, by creating opportunities to do that. So I encourage you to do that too. I'd love to hear how you, what you took from this chapter, and how you are going to be more intentional about loving people well. Keep your eyes open for a giveaway today, because we're 2 weeks in, and that's super exciting. So I want to, I actually have 2 fun things I'll be giving away. It's a couple of books that I love. And so keep your eyes open and make sure you comment there, so that you personally could win those books for yourself. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later, and have an